La plus grande de nos richesses ne se mesure pas en millions. Nous vous faisons découvrir des ovnis pour vous permettre d'en devenir un, vous aussi. Sportifs, entrepreneurs, artistes, ils nous partagent chaque semaine leurs récits de véritables trésors d'informations.
Hi, Francesco. How are you?
Oh, good. Thanks. How are you doing?
I'm fine. Nice day at the office, as always. So thanks for joining us on the podcast. So for those who don't know you, I'm joined by Francesco, investor at Runa Capital, an engineer turned investor with some cool convictions on European venture, especially when it comes to deep tech. Like he deeply thinks that we should bring hardware back, especially in Europe when it comes to venture. And so, the goal is to dive into Francesco's journey, like what he looks for in founders, his vision for Europe tomorrow's in physical technology. And so, super nice to have you with us, man. Yeah.
Thanks for having me.
Let's get straightforward into the episode. We don't have a lot of time. So, first of all, Francesco, where were you born? Where did you grow up? And then we can move it from there.
I was born in the most beautiful city in the world, after Paris, which is Rome. And I grew up there, actually. I lived in Rome until the end of my university days. And then I went to the US a little bit, and then I left Rome for about 10 years before coming back. Now I'm back, luckily, and I'm very happy to be back. Yeah.
Okay. What would you say Rome is famous for?
Not venture capital, technology. Of course, for its history and for bureaucracy, traffic, inefficiencies, I would say. Hopefully we'll change that, but it's not the most efficient place on Earth.
Mm-hmm.
Which, to be honest, growing up, if you are ambitious and you want to be surrounded by people that care about technology and stuff like that, is not the right place. And as a matter of fact, most of my friends who are not into politics or are not into law, they had to leave. That's the common path for everyone who's born in Rome, to leave and come back a little bit later in their life.
Okay. So not many engineers in Rome.
We actually have a super good engineering school, and actually aerospace is one of those things that we do pretty well, but few people know that. So yes, there's good engineering, but not like startups, not places where young kids dream of going. And that's one of the biggest problems of many of the capitals here in Europe. And then we can talk about that later, right?
It's not only Rome. I mean, so, okay, you were a kid in Rome. Like, how did you, what was your path into like engineering, creating robots and so on?
I think it was just by chance, or like meeting some people during my studies that sparked this passion, I would say. I was not when growing up, I really liked classic history, Latin, Greek, and literature. So I was not the kind of person that dreamed of becoming an engineer. I wanted to be a journalist, or I wanted to work with like words, I would say. Then I ended up in engineering, but I really didn't know what I wanted to do. But I found a couple of good professors that really inspired me to look into it a bit more. And the more I looked into it, the more I liked it. I decided to go into autonomous driving and autonomous robotics in around like 2017 and 2018, which is when many of the companies that we see now have started to.
Yeah, you had like Cruise in the US. Maybe?
Cruise was becoming big. Uber was investing a lot of money. Apple was investing a lot of money. Tesla was coming out with its full self-driving. Waymo was making waves. Wave in the UK was started back then, and I clearly remember when Alex Kendall released this paper saying, "Hey, why don't we do autonomous driving with end-to-end AI?" And people were like, "This is never going to work." And he was right. So that was an exciting time looking back.
And so it was mostly for you as a young engineer in Europe, you were mostly interested about the scientific aspect of things, right? Not necessarily like going into the venture path or creating a business around it.
I had no idea what venture capital was. I didn't grow up in a my parents, they're doctors. They don't know anything about this word. I didn't grow up listening to podcasts. To be honest, the material that was available back then was way less than it is today. But I came in contact with startups by pure sort of luck, I would say. I spent some time at UC Berkeley, and of course there you see a lot of stuff happening. I remember there were KiwiBots. Now I think they rebranded into robot.com, but one of the first startup that started doing autonomous robots in public spaces. They started from Berkeley, and back then they were driving around on campus. And then when I came back to Italy, I joined an early stage startup, and that's how I got in touch with the world of startups, fundraising, how to survive when you're not making money and stuff like that.
Okay. And so you've been there for 4 years at the startup, joining as one of the first employees, then doing a bunch of things really.
Yeah.
How did you, what's your path into being an investor at Runa Capital? Can you take us?
So I joined, Yape was the name of the first company I joined. I was one of the first employees. And when I joined, I had to build everything, right? We had to decide the architecture of the software stack. We had to decide which sensors to put on it, on the robot. And we were a bunch of young people with a lot of time to waste on robots, but not a lot of knowledge. We had to discover all on our own. And it was a lot of fun. But I've never been a good engineer, to be honest. I was not good at writing software. Maybe because I had to learn it by myself. I didn't study that at school. Italian schools don't teach you how. Maybe now they do, but back then I didn't have a C++ course and had never used Linux at school, right? So I had to learn everything on my own. And as many things you sort of learn on your own, you make them work, but they're not perfect. And so when we had to decide whether we should hire someone better than myself, we luckily did, and he is now a good friend of mine. So I'm very happy to have brought him on board. And I took care more of product, business. I've always been a people's person, so it was good for me to be in touch with customers, etc. Then COVID came, things were not looking great at the company, so I took some time off. I ended up doing an MBA in France, actually, at INSEAD. And during that time, I thought I could start something new. I really had this sort of feeling that I didn't do all my job. I wanted to succeed, right? And so it was okay, I'll try again. And I tried starting something with a close friend of mine. We had built the robot. We tried to fundraise. We tried to make it work with a few customers. But when we realized there was no way to make money, the business model was not working, I needed to find a normal job. I remember telling my girlfriend, I need to move back with my parents. I cannot pay the rent. And she was like, no, you need to find a normal job that pays a good salary. I was like, okay, maybe this is female wisdom. And so I started interviewing with companies, but I couldn't see myself in a corporate job, honestly. I just felt like I've never worked in such a structured environment, and I didn't want to do that at 28 years old, 29 years old. I was back then, I think. And so I thought, and then I interviewed with a bunch of VC funds, and I thought it was a fun job to do. A bit of stability. We always joke that founders are putting all the eggs in one basket, while us VCs, we diversify a bit more. So a little bit more stability, but still this very dynamic job where you talk to a bunch of people, you never get bored, right? And so it was a good job to do.
And so your process at Runa was you pitching your previous startup, right?
Yeah, the first interview I had with Dima, the GP I work with now, he asked me to pitch my startup. So I was like, but I know it's not gonna work because I tried and it didn't work. But it's yeah, go on, pitch. So I did my pitch. It was fun. It was a very different first interview, and I think it really speaks of the investor DMA is very different. It's non-consensus, if you wish, but I don't think he would like to call himself that way. It's very different.
Yeah, because like non-consensus is beginning to be like the consensus.
Yeah, exactly. Consensus is like the joke you say, but like he's really very different.
Okay.
He's a physicist. He's a very technical guy. And I think also the way he interviewed me and the process was very different than standard processes, and I really enjoyed that.
Okay. Maybe when it comes to like you coming into venture, were you like intentional into like doing deep tech investments, or like do you think that whatever kind of the team you were working for, like you could have done like software and so on, like were you intentionally into like working with DIMA? And then obviously like why are you so excited when it comes to deep tech hardware, especially in Europe? Would love to kind of know that as well.
Yes. So I honestly don't think I know enough about other things to be a good investor in that. So I remember talking to a fund that was doing B2C investments, and I'm not on any social. If you look at my smartphone, I don't have any single app. I'm not an early adopter of anything. So I was like, we were talking, and I was thinking, like, I don't know anything about this space. Like, why should I be the one picking companies in this space? So in terms of like investing in technical stuff, it came naturally. So yes, I think I couldn't invest in very different things. Of course, there's a lot of technical software, and so there's something in between, and I'm happy to do that. There's very interesting stuff, but I also think that being prepared and knowing about a topic is important for what we do, right? So I don't think I could invest in things that I don't use or don't believe in.
Because with DIMA, it's mostly like novel computing that you guys invest in.
We've invested a lot in future of computing, right?
Okay.
So I think the whole thesis started at Runa with quantum, and then when I joined, we started discussing, and it was like the reason why we believe quantum is transformative also apply to other areas of computing, photonics, novel semiconductors. There's a bunch of underlying themes that are common to all this kind of technologies. So it just felt right to expand the thesis to the broader future of computing space, right?
Okay.
So yeah.
You are super bullish on Europe.
Yes.
As a technology kind of contingent. Like, why so? What has changed over the past like 5 to 10 years, in your perspective? And like, what do you think it's an interesting kind of asset to invest in?
Yeah. Well, I think specialization wins. And I think there is a reason why the world evolved towards the current setup, where in all the complex supply chains, there's monopolies at every step. If you think about semiconductors, there's monopolies at every step because it's a very complex thing. And so it makes sense that like companies that specialize and countries that specialize become better at that. But the problem is that once a country becomes good at something, it becomes complacent. And if you think about creative destruction, right? That's the way startups take over incumbents. Incumbents become big. They say, hey, we know how to do this. We don't need to invest anymore. And when things change, new entrants can start eating their dinner from the sides, and then they take over. So that's what happened to Europe and the US over time. And China was the new entrant, was the startup that took over the incumbents. And this specialization works when everybody agrees that it's a fragile world where there's a lot of inefficiencies, but the efficiency you gain from specializing overcomes all the inefficiencies. Now we got to a point where China says, hey, why do I have to be one small player if I can eat the incumbents? I'll take control of the inefficiencies and I'll take most of the price for myself. And the inefficiencies are the fragility of our system. So our supply chain is super efficient in terms of costs, but it's very fragile. And so if one of the players playing in this space decides that they want to break this fragility and want to take advantage of this fragility, everything breaks. So now everything is breaking. And so you see all this tendency of like reshore, manufacturing, supply chains, etc.
And do you think that it will be kind of are we onshoring at any cost from your perspective? Like,
it depends on what you put into the cost function, right? So like in general, markets minimize a objective function, right? And so when we started offshoring, we were minimizing the cost function. So we wanted to have better products at cheaper prices. We were not putting resilience into the objective function, right? We knew that we had Taiwan as a single point of failure, and Taiwan is like a few kilometers away from China, but we didn't put that into the cost function. We were like, okay, TSMC is so good at what they do and give so much back to the world that we're okay with having that fragility. So if you all of a sudden, if you put resilience and if you put like safety even like into the equation, then probably there's certain areas that you wouldn't reshore only thinking about cost, but then you have to reshore if you want to be sure that things don't break, right?
Okay.
Like think about what happens if tomorrow morning we wake up and Taiwan is invaded by China. Like that would be a disaster. Like we wouldn't be recording this probably.
Yeah. So yeah, okay. Super interesting. When it comes to like what lacks for the European deep tech ecosystem to strive, from your perspective, so you are currently working on several initiatives for like assembling kind of the whole capital of Europe around the hardware, deep tech hardware. For you, what is missing?
So I think it's there's a bit of many things. There's structural problems in the way Europe is built, and I'm not the first one pointing this out. There's amazing movements, EU Inc. and all these movements that are trying to solve that. And I'm a great supporter. I really hope they work. So that's taking the problem from top down. And then there's a problem of which is more bottom up, which is people need to know that there's an alternative path to corporate. People need to have capital that is risk capital that is willing to take big risks and take big shots. And the system must be built in such a way that capital can be allocated on certain factors, on certain assets. And that's a problem that we can act on as members of the investor community and members of the startup world, right? So first, the whole European VC ecosystem was born copying the one in the US. And the US VC world in the last 20 years has been focused on software, rightly so, because it gave them amazing returns. Yeah. It didn't pay the European VC ecosystem the same sort of profits, but most of the old school VCs in Europe were trained to think about software. We're trained to think about companies built in a certain way with a certain sort of P&L, certain balance sheet, a certain timeline of raising, kind of like capital they raise, etc. Building a hardware startup is very different. And so you really want to have people that understand that, understand what are the possibilities when raising capital, non-dilutive grants, debt, asset-backed financing, all this kind of stuff. You want to have investors that understand timelines. And when I say investors, is VC funds, but also LPs. So you want to be sure that everybody is on the same page.
Do you think that timelines are like so different than in software? Because I was looking at it's the Lakestar, I think, deep tech report, where at the end of the day, like the exit timeline is kind of similar. Like it's 6 years, 7 years.
The growth is different, though.
Yeah, the growth is different.
Like you have step growth.
Yeah.
In hardware companies, you invest a lot you take a lot of technical risk, and then all of a sudden, like so throughout the venture sort of growth career, where you raise a seed, an A, a B, a C, you have to have investors that know what are the timelines and the KPIs you want to look at, right? So if you expect revenues at seed, probably you're not gonna invest in hardware, or not all kind of hardware, right?
Even Series A, I mean.
Even Series A sometimes, exactly. So probably yes. And also capital intensity, there's a lot of like people that showed how hardware startups are not necessarily more capital intensive than software startups, because at the end of the day, software startups very often have to fight for a market share that they have to pay for, right? So
it's fixed cost that turns into like CapEx.
Investments in OPEX or but you have to look at the startup with different eyes. You cannot think about customer retention, all these little ratios that we think about, right?
So it's mostly like, because I feel that at the seed stage, you are starting to have like those kind of investors that are willing to take the risk, the technical risk. But for you, it's much more at the like maybe growth stage that there is kind of a lack for deep tech companies to grow in Europe.
I think that's true in general. Like we've been discussing this a lot, right? When it comes to raising a big fat Series A or Series B, who's investing in those in Europe? Mm-hmm. Sometimes it's Americans. There's a few funds that are doing a great job, but there aren't many, right? That can sort of be leads of a $50 million round or a $100 million round. So that's for sure something that needs to change. But it's not only investors, also founders need to know what kind of company, how these companies look like while they grow, right? And what investors look at and blah, blah, blah. That's why I think it's worth pulling people together and creating a community of people that have been through that and can share that. Like a big part of the software venture community has been sharing best practices and putting online a lot of stuff. There's plenty of like blog posts describing how a SaaS company should look like when it's at a given stage. We should do the same for hardware. And it starts from the bottom, right?
Yeah.
Bringing together people and discussing, etc.
And also like people that have kind of lived the scale at like deep tech companies that then like come back into like seed companies and
that have raised equity, that have raised debt, that have built, have made investments in capex, that have had to deal with regulatory issues, that have to deal with governments. Even like if you think about companies that are that need to build, I don't know, semiconductor manufacturing facilities, they have to interact with their governments, like to get grants and to get permissions, etc. Right?
Yeah.
So you want to have those founders that have been through that.
Yeah, founders and operators as well.
And operators, yeah.
So you've been like speaking with a bunch of people from different like capitals all over Europe for some projects. And I think you have a cool vision on like some cool companies in Europe when it comes to deep tech hardware.
Yes.
Can you like maybe tell us 3 companies that were into the discussion quite often when you speak to investors in different cities?
Well, of course, there's a new generation of hot companies that came out that were really good in building a brand around themselves. There's a few here in France. There's a bunch in Germany. I'm thinking about, I don't know, the Exploration Company. I'm thinking about Proxima. I'm thinking about Iser. And this kind of companies that have been able to raise a considerable amount of money. Robco or Neura Robotics, etc.
By the way, do you think those companies have to like expand to the US to succeed?
Not necessarily, right? Sometimes being in Europe is their competitive advantage. Like, I don't know, I love to listen to interviews to Francesco from Proxima. I really think he has a really sharp mind and he can communicate really well what are his advantages, and he's given a few interviews recently that are amazing. And what he says is, if you really want to build complex stuff, Europe is the place to be, right? I think he mentioned, him or his interviewer mentioned that the stat that Germany has more CNC operator than the whole of the US. So if you want to build complex stuff, that Germany is the place to go, right? These machines are usually built in northern Italy. If you talk to this kind of people, their suppliers are in in Central Europe, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I don't see why they have to expand in the US, right?
Okay.
The only reason why I would suggest them to expand is for capital. Like if they need to raise $1 billion and they're not able to find it here, you'll have funds there that can finance that. That's a problem we have to fix here, right? Of course.
Yeah, funds that can like put capital at scale in those kind of companies.
Who's gonna lead a $1 billion round in Proxima, right?
Yeah.
I don't know. In Europe.
Yeah, that's a hard kind of thing to tackle, I think, in Europe, obviously. Maybe when it comes to like how you like evolved as an investor over the past few years, what do you specifically look for in a deep tech founder at Runa? Like, what are the 3 main qualities that you think make an entrepreneur successful?
Yeah. So, I like to take, there are some traits that are like personality traits and some others that are like the kind of companies they're building. So I like to take technological risks. I don't like to take market risks, which means that most of the companies I like end up being very big bets on a technology, very vertically integrated in such a way that if they succeed, they have no intermediaries and the market they take is gigantic, right? So you want to build, that's the usual, you want to build the rocket and not the component of the rocket, right? To build such a company, you have to have a founder that is a good storyteller. That's number 1 for me, because early stage companies are 100% storytelling, right? You have to convince your investors that you're going to able to do that. You have to convince your early employees that you're going to able to do that. You have to convince your customers that take a leap of faith in buying your product or investing in your technology. And if you're not a good storyteller, there's not a single technology that can sell itself, right? You'll never get there, right?
Yeah.
You're never gonna hire the best people, etc. If you look at all these companies that we mentioned, the founders are great storytellers in their own way, but they're all great storytellers. The other thing they're very self-aware. They know where they stand. They know that building a company in Germany is not the same as building a company in Texas. It's not the same as building a company, I don't know, in Stockholm or in Europe. And in general, they know what are their strengths and their weaknesses, and the strengths and the weaknesses of what surrounds them. And so when Francesco says Germany has a lot of CNC machining guys,
this is a cool insight.
And I need to build complex stuff.
Yeah,
I want to be in Europe, right?
Okay.
And the third thing is they're very authentic, right? Our job is very hard in the sense that sometimes when deals are good, they're very fast, and you don't have much time to spend with the founder. So it's easy to put a mask on and sort of pretend you're someone you're not, right? The best founders keep on being the same after you invest in them, or not after you don't invest in them and you keep talking to them, right? And I really appreciate that, and I think that's that is a really good trait to have in business in general, because this is a very long game and people remember, and so you can fool me once, but hopefully not more than one.
Yeah.
So that I really like in founders.
How do you how do you see these traits, like when the process is so fast and you just have like 3 to 4 calls with the founders? Like,
it's really hard. I honestly don't know the answer to this question.
Okay.
I wish I knew. I like to spend time in person with the founder. So if I can, I spend 1 day with them. And of course, it's really like you go through the business, but then you have lunch together. Then you take the subway together maybe, and you discuss about stuff, right?
Okay.
And at least you get a little bit. Also, you see, something I really like is going in their office and seeing what's the
dynamic.
Yeah, how are the employees, how they're behaving, and what's the vibe in the office. Like, I've been in some offices where I was like, I'm not going to invest in this guy. Like, this place doesn't have a good vibe. And
Okay.
But of course, it's like very limited, right?
Yeah, it's like signals that you try to extrapolate and then you get to a conviction.
Yeah.
Okay. Maybe for so the podcast is really short because like we want to go like straightforward into things. You've traveled a lot in Europe. You have some convictions. What would be the most underrated city in Europe when it comes to deep tech investing from your point of view?
I think there's pockets of like excellence that people don't know about. And good things come out of them, right? So, for example, in Naples, there's really good research on superconducting quantum computers, and many good researchers come from there. Bologna in Italy, or sorry for mentioning all Italian cities, but like Bologna has a really good university with amazing professors in computing, and a lot of good work around RISC-V and sort of open computing is coming from research done there.
Yeah, C5, they have the company C5?
Yeah, the Pulp platform,
they have a bunch of people there.
So this pockets, even Dresden for computing is amazing. Yeah. And then of course, Switzerland for robotics. Maybe it's a bit more well known, but like you have these pockets of talent that come from either university or industry that make, like, sometimes we talk about fragmentation. In this case, fragmentation is good, right? You cannot have a single place. You have to take advantage of all these places, but you have to create the foundations to for investors to invest in these different places from the same fund. And that's why EU Inc. is so important, right? You really want to make the most out of this fragmentation, of this diversity, I would say.
Interesting. For me, I would say, I think I was super surprised about Helsinki. Helsinki, the quality of like deep tech founders there is amazing.
Now people are talking about Stockholm, but if you've observed enough, you knew that Stockholm was an amazing place for startups, right? Now they have a few winners, and people are talking about Sweden, right?
Yeah.
But Sweden has been an amazing place for startups for a long time.
Yeah.
Right?
Okay. Last question. When it comes to like what gets you interested right now, like what trend really excites you when it comes to deep tech?
I really think we have a big opportunity to change the energy system of our economies, especially in countries that rely too much on gas or fossil fuels. Italy is one of those. Maybe France not so much because of nuclear, but Italy certainly is, and Germany has been for a long time. And I think one good thing that will come out of this bubble that is AI is that a lot of the investments that are being made for the energy infrastructure to power the data centers will be reusable. It's like sometimes people talk about the GPUs as the railway of this bubble, or the fiber of this bubble, meaning something that when the bubble busts, it stays there and it's used as a backbone for the progress of the future. I don't think that's the GPUs and the actual data centers will be the backbone of the future. I think the energy capacity that we're building around them is what is gonna change the future of the Western world. Because energy, everything is downstream of energy. If you have cheaper energy, everything from even like the food you put on your table is going to be cheaper. So that's something that I'm very bullish on.
Okay, super super cool. Any hot takes on defense in Europe?
I don't know enough about defense to have hot takes. I think that's one of those sectors that operate in very particular ways in terms of procurement, in terms of like dynamics, in terms of timelines. Maybe things are changing because there's a bit of urgency, but still, like, you have to go through a lot of steps that you have to understand. Certainly from a geopolitical standpoint, we have not invested enough in our own security. Maybe we thought that we were good friends with the US, and we find out that we're not. So I am pro spending more in a broad sort of geopolitical sense, but I don't know enough to know how to win in that space in terms of venture investing.
Okay, super cool. Well, Francesco, thank you so much for joining us.
You're welcome.
It was super nice to have you with us in Paris and so on. Looking forward to maybe make deals together.
Yes, absolutely.
In the future.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks.
Ciao.